Hello and welcome to Spyhards podcast, where your hosts go deep undercover into the world of spy movies to decipher which films make the knock list. But remember, this information is strictly for your ears only. I'm Agent Scott.
And I'm Cam the Provocateur, trying to figure out his two-step verification for DirecTV.
Have you sussed it yet?
Well, I'm in real trouble because I'm in Canada and we don't even have DirecTV. So, it's a 3-step, maybe even like a 12-step verification process for me.
I would have gone with 39 steps.
Oh, you know what? I really should have. I failed miserably. Do over.
Right
Do over. Scrap the episode.
Start
Let's
again.
Start over.
Again. And, an interesting time to release this. Originally, the film that came out last week was scheduled to be our Christmas episode, but we looked at our sort of timings for everything. So we thought we'd sneak this one in before the festive cheer rings. So this is technically our second Christmas film of the year.
I guess so. Yeah. We thought it would be nice to start 2025 My Spy free.
That's not a leading comment at all, Cam.
No, not at all. And as you can hear from my voice, actually, I've been partying too hard this holiday season, so I apologize. For you guys have to sit and listen to this, but it really is double the injury given the topic and the voice.
Now everyone has to listen to it too, right before Christmas. That's what a present.
Right? Exactly. Yes, this is like the old coal in the stocking.
All right. So last week was the true present, and this is the coal.
Yeah.
So some of our listeners have been naughty this year, is what you're saying.
Well, or I've been naughty and I deserve this.
Right, and that's why you have a cold. That makes a lot of sense. Well, let's dispense with the dancing around. What are we talking about this week?
Yes, we are tackling 2024's My Spy: The Eternal Sit.
I'm glad you used that because I also had that written down as a tagline joke for when I did my review later on.
Yes. But actually, it's My Spy: The Eternal City, starring Dave Bautista.
Yes, it is. It really is the film we're talking about this week, folks. Better believe it.
Yeah, and we tackled, obviously, the original a few weeks ago, and that was a movie that was supposed to go to theaters and then was kind of messed up by the pandemic.
Sure.
And then became kind of a big player on Amazon Prime. And so, Amazon Prime right away was like, give us a sequel. And they were like, we'll get back to you in 4 years.
Yeah, I think one of the first things this film did wrong is take 4 years to come out. And we'll come back to that. It is also interesting. And one of the reasons that we decided to sneak this in before the year changes is one thing we've charted over the years of doing these more recent direct-to-streaming films is the longer we wait to review it, the less interested people are to hear our thoughts.
Also very true. And so I think that's something that we tried to correct this year on Spyhards. Maybe you didn't notice, but we will look at as well going forward in 2025 and beyond, which is that when there are streaming movies that don't necessarily have the mega wattage to kind of give them a longer life. Like, for example, imagine we were like a, I don't know, mob movie podcast.
I'm imagining. Go on.
Sure. And we tackled The Irishman at this point in time. People would show up because The Irishman has had a life to it. But a lot of these spy movies that land on streaming, they are kind of like 1 or 2 week sensations. And sometimes sensation is hyperbole for me to be saying. And then they just completely vanish into the ether. And so we want to make sure that we cover them while they are somewhat relevant. For example, recently we talked about the Halle Berry, Mark Wahlberg film, The Union. And we didn't, hate that movie by any stretch of the imagination, but it just completely went nowhere.
Yeah.
And now I think if you even mention that movie, people would just give you a blank stare.
Oh, absolutely. I think the response online was pretty muted anyway to the film, let alone our posts about the Union. But also, it works the other way around. We tackled the Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare about a month or so after it released, something like that. Obviously, it did have a cinematic release and then was put onto streaming. So we did it when the streaming release came out. And we had a great interview with the writer of the book it's based on as well. And that was really popular with you guys. And you really liked that review and that interview. So it can work if we do it at the right time. So we're trying to get that balance right because I think a lot of these, take for instance, The Grey Man.
Yeah.
When was the last time anyone mentioned The Grey Man in a discussion?
Or the Grey Man sequels that were greenlit.
or Citadel and the Citadel sequels that were greenlit.
Sure. Yeah, totally.
So this is kind of us trying to get as close to My Spy: The Eternal City's release as we can. So I guess here we go. If you haven't seen the film, here is your synopsis. And much like Dave Bautista's co-star in this film, this one's very short.
How cute.
My Spy: The Eternal City. Rome isn't ready.
Okay.
Nor is Cam. JJ, a veteran CIA agent, reunites with his protege, Sophie, in order to prevent a catastrophic nuclear plot targeting the Vatican.
Yeah. I mean, it's super generic spy plot, but they sum it up there.
Yeah, I mean, there is also a bit of incorrect information. They never separated.
Yeah, no, that is accurate, yeah.
They've been living together as a family ever since the first film. So, yeah, they didn't reunite.
Maybe not the mom.
Well, someone got poochied.
Yeah, no kidding. Like they recast the actress. I don't know why. Probably just complications of scheduling, I'm guessing.
Sure.
But yeah, she's like nurse in Rwanda. She's like calling in. She's like, "Hey guys, I'm good. See you later."
I'm over in Rwanda. Bye. Spy.
And remember, like a big part of the kind of the fun or the plotting of the first film was that there was kind of.
I like how you retracted fun there. You just took that out of the sentence.
I had to like really consider that for a second, but I was like, no, the movie wanted that to be fun, so that is actually an accurate description, whether I agree or not.
Like Batista's dance, right? Like it's fun.
Yeah. That's what I was thinking of. But the whole movie was kind of built around that kind of rom-com aspect as well as the kind of father figure and young girl story. And they got the two of them together, and then it was like, okay, now we separate them again. Okay.
Yeah, I imagine it was just a scheduling thing, unfortunately. And maybe there is some information in the backstory that you'll get into in a moment. But I assume it's our first time with My Spy 2. It's certainly mine. I don't think you watched it on release.
This is the 100th time I've watched this movie.
Uh-huh. Well, since release, you've watched it every day. One a day. It's been 100 days.
That's right. Eternally, I will watch My Spy: The Eternal City.
Can you think of, like, there's the 7 circles of hell. Maybe the 8th is a perpetual rewatch of, or one of those podcasts that do like a minute at a time.
Oh, yeah.
Of My Spy: The Eternal City. Like, whoever does that podcast, I tip my hat to you for finding things to talk about, because I'm looking at my notes and just wondering how I'm going to talk about this for 90 minutes.
I mean, I think Trenchcoat would be the worst circle, right?
Yeah. I mean, the disavowed list is probably a circle in itself.
Yeah. No, that's true.
Like, who wants to watch a double bill of a Men in Black 4, Trenchcoat, and Midnight in St. Petersburg?
Or Eye of the Beholder as well.
Yes. A film I rather happily refer to as I would rather watch my grandmother get lowered into a meat grinder than sit through that film again. Yeah, a statement that I stand right by.
Well, it's like we are really ending 2024 on a high with Eye of the Beholder and My Spy: The Eternal City.
Yeah, there is also, Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy squeezed
That's
in
right.
there, and some other fun interviews we've got coming out just after Christmas. And of course, our infamous, famous, any other word you'd like to insert, year wrap up with your voicemails are all featured as well. That's coming very soon. Look out for that. So there are some good presents underneath this Christmas tree, but we have to unwrap this one.
Yes, exactly, yes.
So let's begin the process of unwrapping it, Cam. Why don't you take us back to how My Spy 2 happened?
Well, the behind the scenes on this movie is very sparse. There's really not very much at all, but I will dive into what I've got. So this is again a screenplay by the Hober brothers, who we've tackled multiple times. And as I mentioned in the first My Spy, they've been working since the late 90s, and their breakthrough was the Kate Beckinsale comic book adaptation, Whiteout, a movie I don't think people really remember, but it was kind of like a horror thriller kind of thing.
Sure.
And then they wrote Red, which we covered both Red films, and they wrote the screenplays for both of the Red films.
Ironically, the first one we tackled as a Christmas film last year.
That's right. We like to celebrate Christmas with the Hober brothers. So I guess in the future we'll have to look at movies like Battleship, Transformers: Rise of the Beasts, or the Meg films.
Ho ho hoba.
Oh, that's good. I guess we could do the Meg films on the Patreon.
Only because you want to talk about sharks.
Well, if we're celebrating the Hober brothers around the holidays, you have Jason Statham, so you could actually stretch that into 2 years and have the Meg and Meg 2, The Trench, on different Christmases.
Whoa, Cam, can you hear that sound? It's the sound of no one joining our Patreon.
Oh.
Patreon.com/Spyhards. Thanks.
Yeah. So this movie, My Spy, The Eternal City, was actually their follow-up to Meg 2, The Trench. And they, yeah, as I said, had written the first My Spy as well. And director Peter Segal, who also directed the original My Spy, came back for this one. He had a writing credit this time. So I guess the Hober brothers, submitted something, and then he was working with them to shape the story.
Sure.
Versus last time he was just brought on just to direct. And he's someone who comes from the world of comedy. And so, Scott, I can see the look on your face.
And he's got nothing. He gave it all up, and he's just here to do something else now.
Yeah, like he's worked on, many comedy TV specials. He was handpicked to direct Naked Gun 33 1/3, The Final Insult for Zucker and Abrahams. And actually, we should note at the time of recording, actually, that Jim Abrahams, who worked on not just the Naked Gun films, but also Airplane and Top Secret, recently passed. And so a comedy legend there. And the fact that, him and the Zucker brothers were picking Peter Segal to take over the Naked Gun franchise, I think it's pretty noteworthy that they obviously recognized in him like a spark that could actually carry that franchise forward. And I know that Naked Gun 33 1/3 isn't the most loved, but I really have fond memories of that one.
Oh, it's probably the one I've seen the most, I think, out of the three.
The Oscar section of that movie alone is incredible.
And they got the football game at the end and stuff as well. I always remember that. Isn't the Queen in that?
Football? No, you're thinking of the first one.
Oh, damn. Which one's the Queen in?
That's the first one.
Oh, well, I watched the first one loads.
Yeah, the third one ends with the Oscars.
Oh, it's in an envelope, right?
Yes, that's right. And Fred Ward is the villain.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. I saw that movie in theaters, and I've seen it many times. So it's not like it was a one-time nostalgia movie. It's like, no, I've seen that movie many times, and it always is very funny.
I don't think they've had many duds.
No.
Of the films I know of, there's, from Top Secret to, Airplane, I think it's my favorite comedy of all time.
Yeah, things got a little less great when they kind of separated, and you were getting, I think Scary Movie 3, I think.
Yeah, I think didn't the Wayans family have 1 and 2, and then they took over it on 3 or something like that. There was like a movement.
Yeah, but it wasn't all of them. It was like 1 or 2 of them did the 3rd and 4th Scary Movies,
which had Leslie Nielsen in, so tying back to Airplane and stuff.
And I don't remember which one, but one of the team went and did like that really conservative spoof movie, An American Carol.
Okay.
Yeah, they kind of went in weird directions, but in their prime, those 3 guys, the Zuckers and Abraham team, were unstoppable.
Oh yeah, they've, as I say, Airplane, I think, is the greatest comedy of all time, and that's I don't think many people would disagree.
Yeah, and so Peter Segal, handpicked by them, so obviously he has bona fides, and goes on and does movies like Tommy Boy, which was a real hit with David Spade and Chris Farley. He did My Fellow Americans with Jack Lemmon and James Garner. Nutty Professor 2, The Clumps, which not so great, but again handpicked to take over a very big franchise. Because obviously 1996's Nutty Professor was huge. Anger Management and 50 First Dates with Adam Sandler.
Both good films, yeah.
And The Longest Yard as well with Adam Sandler.
Also fun.
And Get Smart, a movie we are going to tackle on the show at some point.
He's someone I've tried to get on the show multiple times now. I have sent emails out, but just never heard back. So I don't think we've quite hit the peak of getting him on yet, but I think one of these days we will finally net him.
Yeah, it's like his career hit kind of a rougher patch, I think, around the time of Grudge Match, the De Niro, Stallone boxing comedy. But since then, he's done, obviously the My Spy films, And in between My Spy and My Spy, The Eternal City, he did 10 episodes of the Stephen Amell wrestling show Heels.
Oh,
Did you watch it?
despite being a wrestling fan, no.
Okay, I don't know if it's any good.
I'm not a big Stephen Amell guy. I never really got the love for the Arrow.
Yeah.
And I'd rather just watch wrestling.
He did Arrow, and I think was he like the voice of maybe Leonardo in one of the Michael Bay Ninja Turtle movies or something?
I don't know. I have no
No,
idea.
that was Knoxville. Yeah,
He does a lot of voice work. That makes sense. No, I have no inclination on that really. I just Heels I know existed because it had several actual wrestlers in the show because they had to feature actual wrestling, and Stephen Amell also trained to be a wrestler as well and did appear on several wrestling pay-per-views. So there is kind of a tie in there, and that's why he did the show.
okay, yeah, I saw Stephen Amell at a fan expo where he was talking about that show before it aired.
Right.
So yeah, okay,
I think it's been cancelled now. I think it did 2 seasons.
right, okay. Well, so STX Films, who made the original My Spy, they announced this movie in like 2020. Like they were like, we want to develop a My Spy 2 immediately. Like we want to have this be an ongoing franchise. And they didn't even confirm the movie until 2023 in February. And they had cranked out several drafts because Chloe Coleman said she read a couple drafts where her character was like much more boy crazy, and she wasn't really big on that.
Good.
Yeah, but by the time like they did make the movie, it's like they announced it in February 2023, and they finished shooting it in like May. So like it was a very quick production.
You can get a sense of that in this.
Yeah.
I mean, if like Napoleon was done in 60 odd days, this doesn't need to have been much longer than that.
That'd be amazing if it took like far longer than Napoleon.
Well, didn't Gladiator 2, which just came out, take also a small amount of time?
Ridley Scott works incredibly fast. He has a massive team.
Well, he's been catching heat for that now. Like I think it was his editor on Gladiator 2 or something like that. Maybe his DP came out and said that does not like the way he shoots anymore. Like he has like 11 cameras running at all times and stuff, and like leaves artifacts in the frame and just waits for it to get taken out in post. Doesn't even bother to change setups or lighting. Just lights everything in a flat sort of way just to get stuff done. I mean, take it or leave it. I think Gladiator 2 does what it needs to do. It does what it says on the tin, as the saying goes, but I don't think it quite lives up to the original.
No, not even close to what the original's even trying to do. But like a thing with Ridley Scott is this guy is like in his 80s.
Yeah.
And I think he just wants to like make as many movies as he can.
Yeah.
And so that's going to be his process. But there was definitely a point when I was watching Gladiator 2 on the big screen, and it was at the start of the movie with the oceanside town,
sure,
where they were talking about strategy for the upcoming battle, and all of the water in the background looked like a screensaver.
I didn't pay attention to it, but I could absolutely believe it.
And I was like, really? Huh? Wasn't this movie quite expensive? Because that looks this looks worse than the baboon that will show up a little bit later.
Yeah, or the rhino, or the all sorts of weird things. I mean, this is also the problem with My Spy Eternal City, is we're pivoting away to talk about Gladiator 2 instead.
Yeah. Well, 2024 movies, I suppose.
But I understand why this has a quick turnaround to bring it back. Like I think it is quite a small, despite it being globe-trotting in a way. I don't think it is as big as its predecessor.
What, this movie or Gladiator?
Both.
Okay. Yeah, like I would say My Spy, I think it is bigger. I think in some ways it is. Like it, by kind of going to all the different locations, feels bigger than the original.
I think maybe in the sense of like a global scope expansion, I would agree with you there.
Yeah.
But I think this has far less to say than the first one does.
I agree with you there. And so, yeah, Chloe Coleman, I read a lot of interviews for My Spy 2, and they are not the most scintillating of interviews. But they did ask Chloe Coleman a lot about the stunts she did in this movie.
Mm-hmm.
And so she was very excited about that. She was inspired by Sigourney Weaver's performance in the first 2 Alien films.
Good for her.
And she said like she constantly looked at what Sigourney Weaver was doing and wanted to kind of evoke that kind of capability in stunt sequences.
Mm-hmm.
And so she trained in wushu and kickboxing. She learned to scuba dive, and she did skydiving simulations.
Nice.
to pull off the opening of this movie.
I completely buy that. There's nothing about it that really jumped out to me as a facsimile of Chloe Coleman. It felt like she was there for a lot of it.
Yeah, there was never a point where it felt like suddenly they switched to the stunt actor.
Like Roger Moore skydiving in Moonraker, and then he becomes a 6'8" man. Like
Right.
it just isn't. It isn't the same thing. Like also, I will note both films do have a parachute jump in the pre-title sequences.
That's true. Yeah, very Moonraker-esque.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And at one point, there's free fall with no parachute. Same thing.
And so the top 3 for this year, because this was not released into theaters, this was a streaming film, but nonetheless, the top 3 for the year of 2024, and we'll see if this is actually correct when we actually cross the line into 2025. I think it will, though. Number 1, Inside Out 2. Number 2, Deadpool and Wolverine. And number 3, Despicable Me 4. All 3 of those movies made $1 billion or just under in the case of Despicable Me 4. I don't think Wicked is going to cross $1 billion, and I don't think Gladiator 2 will.
No.
And I don't think there's anything else coming out this year that will.
I mean, this just goes to show a little bit behind the scenes of when we were recording this episode. So I'm sorry for sort of giving you guys a sort of a context as to when this is happening. But I don't see either film getting as close to 1 billion as the third one on that list was, and the other two obviously went beyond.
No, and we don't have an Avatar 3 opening at in the Christmas season.
No, I think it's pretty set in stone. Although I do think Wicked will get quite close. I think Wicked will play well over the Christmas period. I think it will just get families in, and it will continue to play into January.
The difference is, though, like these movies, the ones I named, did massive international money.
Yeah.
And so far, Wicked is not playing very well internationally.
I didn't know that. That's interesting because it is getting great press here in sort of the United Kingdom.
Yeah, I think in English-speaking countries it does very well, but
Sure.
I don't know how it would play in China, for example.
Well, also it helps that there's a running production of Wicked here on the West End, so it's like there is a synergy there. Like we are aware of Wicked's existence.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think that should be the top 3. And the only note I had in the interviews, they would ask the actors for pitches as to what to do in the sequel if they make a third one.
Which I think they will.
And I think so. I mean, I don't know how much this was watched. That is ultimately what's going to turn the lever on that one. But basically, they all agreed they wanted to see Sophie in college.
Yeah, I think that's the logical progression from where we are now.
So does that mean it's another 4 years until My Spy 3?
How old is she in this?
Oh, God, don't ask me that. I don't
15?
have a clue.
Maybe it's 2 years. College is like 17, isn't it, in North America?
Just seeing. Let's see. Chloe Coleman was born in 2008.
Don't make me math. She's 16.
So yeah, then like only 2 or 3 years.
I think that the college thing is a perfectly good concept. I'd be interested to see how they weave the spy stuff in, but I think that's also been a problem with a lot of these spy movies, is especially on the streaming ones, is it's like the spy plot is secondary to whatever's going on in the background. And one thing we didn't really speak too much about the 4-year gap as to a theory as for why. I mean, my money is on the fact that Dave Bautista is a very busy actor.
That would have to be what it is, right? Like you had the pandemic kind of threw things for a loop in 2020 and 2021 in terms of film productions. So that's going to have an impact there. And then Dave Bautista is doing Guardians of the Galaxy 3, Dune, and various other things. And so
Cabin in the Woods,
yeah, not Cabin in the Woods, A Knock at the Cabin.
Sorry.
Yeah, and then so I would imagine that's what it is. But the fact that they could crank this movie out so quickly too is like, oh. But even like I was reading a quote or an interview bit, I should say, not a quote, but like they were talking about how when they were shooting in South Africa, the interviewer asked them, yeah, it took me a second to pause on that one too, but I think that's like some of maybe the earlier stuff in the movie or something. I'm not exactly sure, but the whole cast was there.
Okay. What?
I was really struggling with that because they asked the actors if they went on a safari, and all the actors went except Dave Bautista, who was too busy shooting scenes, I think, to probably get out of there as quick as possible.
I have no idea why they'd be in South Africa.
I really was like struggling with that myself.
Honestly, I'm not going to waste your time, listeners, to why we struggle around trying to figure it out. If someone knows, do let us know where that might have been, because they're not in South Africa in the film.
I wonder if they just use that as a like home location.
Sure.
I wonder if that's what it was.
Yeah. Anything goes. You never know with these streaming films. So they get their tax breaks. That's where they'll go.
Yeah, filming location, Cape Town, South Africa. So I wonder if they just shot at a studio there and then did all their location work in Italy.
In Italy, yeah. Yeah, for sure. And they definitely did go to Italy in this as well. Like there are some actual shots.
Guaranteed.
I mean, they were definitely in the Vatican too, right? Right?
Yeah, 100%, yes.
Yeah, the Pope
I
was
mean,
there.
they wound up at those same steps as Fast 10 and Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning, so there you go.
Thanks. You just gave me a post for about midweek.
You're welcome.
Perfect. Listeners, social medias, you're welcome. Thanks, Cam. Sorry to interrupt the discussion, gents, but I have some breaking news. To celebrate the festive season, we are giving away another copy of John Walsh's fantastic book, The Third Man, the official story of the film. To enter, all you have to do is join our Patreon at any of the paid levels before January 31st, 2025. Once you've joined, your name will be put into a hat and the winner will get a signed copy of the book alongside some other Spyhards goodies. Plus, you'll have access to over 100 bonus Spyhards episodes. Sounds like a deal if you ask me. But don't worry, folks, if you're already a member of our Patreon, you'll be automatically entered into the draw. You don't have to do anything at all but sit back and enjoy. So, if you want to get your hands on a copy of this tremendous book, make sure to join our Patreon on any of the paid tiers before the 31st of January 2025. You can find a link to the Patreon in the show notes below or head on over to patreon.com/spyhards. But without further ado, let's get back to your regularly scheduled Spy Jinx. Let's get to the meat of it. My Spy 2. Should it exist? Let's find out.
Okay.
I can't use my eternal joke.
I knew I had to jump on that one. As soon as I realized that Eternal City could be shortened to Eternal Sit, I was like, underline that one and make sure that I nail that one very quickly in the episode.
So I'll strip away the joke. I was oddly optimistic walking into this film.
Mm-hmm.
I really liked the characters in the first one. I think Dave Bautista and Chloe Coleman have a great repartee, and they just blend together on screen. Kristen, Schaal, Ken Jeong, great, posse of actors, and they've all come back for this. So like, okay, you've got me. Like I'm here, and plus you've added like Craig Robinson in there. You've added, well, that's about it really. There's someone else I want to talk about later, but we'll leave that to then. And so I was. Because I'm pretty down on these streaming movies, I gotta say. Like when I see the trailers for them, a lot of the times they just fill me full of like fear.
I don't mind when they're like ambitious. I mentioned The Irishman earlier. When you
Sure.
have like a genuine filmmaker making a movie that just happens to be an Apple production,
Yeah,
that's fine. Killers of the Flower Moon, which Scorsese did with Apple.
sure.
That's a great example where it's like, that is a movie that obviously is a prestige film that just happens to be made by Apple. But a lot of these movies, as you said, that are just made specifically as streaming content, that's the difference.
You see like a trailer for Heart of Stone, and you just die inside.
Sure, yeah, or I mean, The Union, which a movie, as I said, we didn't hate, but like does not feel like a particularly ambitious big screen film.
But then I sat and watched the film,
Uh-huh.
and that's where the frustration started. If you ever wanted to find an example, perhaps in the dictionary, of a sequel created merely for the fact of creating a sequel without any concept or forethought as to what I want to say in a film, look at My Spy: The Eternal City. Now, I'm not saying My Spy is to be held up in the pinnacle of the best spy movies of all time. It didn't make the knock list, but it felt like it was made with a little bit of love for spy movies. There was like call outs to different spy films, like Spy Game in there. They had a genuine story they wanted to tell. This is the Spy Kids 4 to Spy Kids. They have not got anything to say. And so I'm sat going through the motions. I mean, it's repetitive and ultimately completely uninspired. And I just think it's a shame because I love the characters, and the characters are still fun in this. I enjoy their interactions, but they've also like changed the dynamic. They've separated the main duo,
Mm-hmm.
which is the one of the failings of Spy Kids 3, I think, if my memory serves. Um, I'm just left scratching my head as to why they completely missed the mark on this one, despite having 4 years for it to gestate.
Yeah, I can't disagree with you. I was actually completely baffled
Good.
that they'd separated the two of them, and to me, like, I'll just dive into my thoughts
Sure, go
now,
for it. Yeah, yeah.
which is that, like, I didn't think My Spy, the original, was any classic, and we talked a lot about how it was kind of a little bit of a, slightly pale imitator to, say, Kindergarten Cop.
Yeah, for sure.
The classic Arnold Schwarzenegger kids movie where they take an action hero, put him with a kid, and have a lot of fun, and then we've seen various imitators of that over the years.
Mm-hmm.
But like My Spy got what traction it had out of the Dave Bautista, Chloe Coleman pairing.
Yeah.
Like the two of them were fun together. There was genuine heart there. I didn't love all the comedy. I thought a lot of the comedy kind of fell flat, but the emotional core of the movie worked. And this movie, by pulling the two of them apart, you take the one thing I thought was genuinely effective in the original and get rid of it. And in the service of what? A Dave Bautista, Ken Jeong buddy comedy? Where the two of them are just like going through very boring action scenarios.
But they separate them eventually too.
I just couldn't make sense of what they want to do with this movie.
No.
Like, they want to have this kind of, is it globetrotting when you're just going to various locations in Italy? Maybe it's not globetrotting at that point. It's Italy hopping.
Italy hopping, yes. We'll stick with that. That's good.
It's an Italy hopping spy adventure. But it's also kind of like sacrificing the elements that made the original fun and rewarding. Like, what I liked in the original was that it was a spy from a very big world being dropped in a very small scenario.
That's a tagline right there with the size difference too. That's very well put.
Right? Yeah. Because it's a globe hopping spy who winds up in just like a apartment.
Right.
With like, a young girl and her mother. And that's like their whole world.
Mm-hmm.
And, you've got school and things. And obviously they want to blow that out, where they want to take now the spy, the Chloe Coleman character who lives in a small world, and send her into a bigger world.
Mm-hmm.
But they do that by sacrificing the charm of the original. And then also, as I said, like giving a lot of the screen time to Ken Jeong and Dave Bautista to have their various hijinks and, attack bird scenarios and things like that.
What was that?
I don't know.
What was that? I wrote this down in the end of my notes, but I feel compelled to bring it up now, of how you fix this. Like, I think I want to just put my flag here and just put it down, and it might inform my discussion. But they fundamentally went the wrong way with this.
Oh, you just put the two of them on the run. It's Dave Bautista and Chloe Coleman together.
Well, that's great. That's not what I had, but it's great.
Yeah.
That's also would be a perfect thing to do. Like, he gets disavowed or something like that, and she's the only one who trusts him, or you build from there, sure.
Yeah, and also like we find out Dave Bautista's character has become, as a father figure, because he's now with Sophie's mother.
Mm-hmm.
He's raising her basically as a daughter. That he's now someone who's become scared of going back to a more dangerous espionage job, and just wants to be an analyst.
Interesting nugget there, isn't it? That's an interesting concept.
It is. And so then if you put him on the run with her, he's now more scared. He has more to lose. He's not a man of action at this point in time, and has to kind of relearn those skills and also keep her safe at the same time. Like, there's a tension there.
Mm-hmm.
I think something like that would at least be more engaging than kind of this movie that is built just as a clothesline for lazy gags,
sure,
and action moments, and it's really long. It's almost 2 hours long, and it's torturous.
We'll come back to that. My pitch was a slight spin on yours, in the sense of, part of the magic of the first one is the kid spy.
Yeah.
So why don't we go down that route a little bit, and maybe make the threat, in a sense of, the only person who can accomplish overcoming the goal or defeating the bad guy is a kid spy. So Chloe Coleman has to be the person in the field, and Dave Bautista has to be the person like aiding her. So he can do that sort of keyboard warrior and then reluctant spy later on. And you do basically a role reversal from the first film. So she's in charge and he's following her lead. And that's a power dynamic you can play with there. And I think that's also another way they could have gone with this. They just didn't.
Yeah, yeah, and I just think like in terms of like conception, this movie doesn't work. Like the concept for it is like it's just it's straining against what makes the
Hmm.
original appealing.
Yeah, they didn't get the memo on what worked in the first one. And it baffles me that this took 4 years.
That doesn't make sense.
Like, it's gone. If it's gone through the ringer, like if it's gone through all these rewrites and all these different people have looked at it, it's had an extra writer from the first one. You'd think it would be more fine tuned, but if anything, if it was more free form, it's 25 minutes longer than the first one.
Well, when you watch it, it doesn't feel artistically that divorced from something like Cats and Dogs 3.
No,
It's a little glossier. Obviously, it's more
it's
of a
got more
professional
money.
production. It's got a little more money, but it doesn't feel at the end of the day artistically that divorced from a Cats and Dogs sequel, and they can crank those movies out quickly.
Ironically, and I do mention Cats and Dogs 3 in my notes, both films feature a singing teen, and I thought we were in real trouble.
There was a absolutely stupefying number of choir scenes in this movie of watching children sing.
I personally love choral music. It's one of my favorite like genres of music to listen to when I'm chilling out. So like, and they, I think it's actually like the Vancouver choral people or something like that. I'll double check that whilst we're talking. So there's actually, I think there's a connection to you there. So I really love the choral stuff, but it doesn't. They really like hammer it in this film.
I was stunned at how much time I had to sit and watch like teenage kids sing choral music. I was just like, what did I sign up for? This is not one of the appealing aspects. And to me, the original, obviously you have Bautista and the kid, and that's kind of the spark of the movie. But even like having Bautista and Kristen Schaal's character bouncing off each other as his kind of wacky partner, it's not exactly the heights of great comedy, but it worked. And again, they separate her as well, and suddenly it becomes the like Kristen Schaal and Ken Jeong who can outmug each other kind of bit. And I'm going like, oh no, no, no. And also Kristen Schaal, God bless her. I think she's very, very talented. But this felt like a movie where they were like, okay, Kristen, we need you to say something funny. Can you come up with something? Because like the lines she was throwing out were the most generic pop culture references possible. Like she says, release the Kraken or punch it, Chewie. These are all like the most on the nose pop culture jokes you could ever imagine. They feel like the kind of jokes that would be tossed aside by the Big Bang Theory writers.
I'll just jump in. The reason I thought it was connected to you is the choral group is La Canada High School Chamber Singers.
Sure.
I actually looked that up because I thought they had really wonderful voices. But I completely agree with you about Kirsten Schaal. I think they had no idea what to do with her. Budding her up with like Ken Jeong just felt like a joke they came up with on set.
Yeah.
Why? Why is this happening? I don't know. It doesn't pay off anything. I think before we trash this film anymore, though, we probably need to talk about the things that do work for us. That might be a short section, but
Yep.
films are tough to make. There are lots of things go into these mixes, these witches' brews. You never know what you're going to get. So there must be some things we enjoy. I went first, so I'll go first here. And I mean, to start off with, I think there's still good chemistry when Bautista and Coleman are on screen together. I think they are good, and it just goes to show what could have been with the film. So I think there is still that bit of magic there on screen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like I don't think there's anything wrong with the chemistry between the two of them. I think they still have it. It's a little less charming when it's like surly teenager
Yeah,
sniping at Dave Bautista.
I think that was a misstep. Genuinely, I think like making her anti her stepfather. Whilst that might track in reality as a stepchild myself, I know I was a handful as a teenager.
Sure.
But is that entertainment?
Well, it could work if the movie was genuinely about that, but it feels like it's so distracted and running in 1,000 directions.
And it's dropped pretty quickly too.
Yeah, and you're not like working through it organically, so it doesn't feel like when you get to a kind of a resolution between the two of them, it's that earned.
No, like the big payoff at the end where she says, "Oh, he's my dad." I didn't get butterflies.
That was when he died, right? He like drowned.
Well, supposed to have had. Yes.
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
that's right. Yeah.
What about you? Alike?
Actually, this movie, the one thing I can say about My Spy 2 is that it corrects one of our biggest criticisms of the first film,
Mm.
which was like the first movie had a unbelievably generic villain.
Sure.
Like I can't even remember that guy. Like he was a nothing burger, and it's not the actor, like just what they wrote and gave him. There was just nothing on the page. Um and the spy plot felt often very just on the sidelines, like real on the sidelines in that first one.
Didn't he get pulled off the side of a cliff in an airplane?
He did at the end, yes. That's right. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, so like that whole kind of element of the first one I thought was a real strike against it
Mm-hmm.
if you're going to try to make a spy comedy. Whereas like this one, maybe it leans too far in the other direction, but I think it's definitely going down kind of it sets itself up well, where you actually have a spy plot that is pretty well laid out. You have Flula Borg as this kind of assassin character that's bouncing around the movie, and there's a lot more personality coming off of him. And then later Anna Faris, when she's revealed as one of the villains, it felt like they almost realized that they had kind of failed in the first movie to create compelling villains, and so this time around actually did so. Both these people are talented. They do, I think, present well on screen. Like I remember who they are now, whereas when we did the first one, like if I ask you now to imagine the villain of the first My Spy, do you remember?
Oh no, I genuinely have been racking my brain the last 3 minutes whilst you were talking to picture the guy in my head. I'm not going to go look it up. I think that's cheating, but I have no idea who it was.
Exactly, yeah. Whereas like here, Anna Faris being kind of the tough talking vice principal early on, and then being revealed as the villain. Like I thought that was like a fun little twist. It's not the kind of thing that blew my socks off. I think to a 12-year-old it might be more surprising, which is more the target audience. But Anna Faris is having fun with it, and I thought that like Flula Borg was also having fun playing this unstoppable assassin.
I was definitely more of a Flula Borg guy than an Anna Faris guy. I found the Anna Faris character to be very hokey.
Sure.
Like I mean, like you say, it probably tracks for 12-year-olds, but like that whole face rip reveal, basically, like it just certainly didn't work for me. Let's put it that way.
It did get maybe the only joke that kind of got a smile out of me,
Go on.
which was like she shows up in villain mode and someone says like, "When did you have time to do your hair?"
I actually did. I did write this down as a like, although I can't cite them. But I actually did laugh at a couple of jokes in this film.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I mean, that's the one that jumps out to me. A lot of them felt very hacky.
Sure. I don't know if it was necessarily Kristen Schaal. I think Ken Jeong got me a couple of times, just because I find him to be quite a funny comedian. But that's just me.
But not the attack birds.
No, that felt like someone had a really good idea in a writer's room, and it didn't go through a filtration process, and it just got left in. And they got to the day, and they're like, "Oh, we're actually doing this. We're actually filming the birds. Oh, okay."
Didn't it feel like it was from a different movie?
Well, it was zany.
Very zany.
Yeah. But there's moments of zany in this film, so I don't know if that's necessarily too far removed. But like, it feels more like a buddy cop thing, yeah, with Ken and Dave. You're right.
Yeah. I mean, I guess it pairs well with the start of the movie, which really actually did throw me for a loop. When I was watching that scene on the plane,
Mm-hmm.
I was literally like, what the hell am I watching? Like, this is insane.
I mean, it's definitely a different film. Like that, it feels like
Oh,
the
yeah.
entrance to the first Charlie's Angels film as well, with the jumping out the airplane. I think with LL Cool J, if I remember correctly.
That's right. Yes, he does show up at the start. Yeah.
Yeah. I felt like, wow, we really like doubled down on her being the very well put together spy. Like that's interesting. Obviously, turns out to be a dream. I was more scared that it was going to focus around this sort of Justin Bieber-esque character throughout the film and be like, I do not care about this.
No, I was quite thankful when the the Ryan character played by Billy Barratt just turned into like a standard issue high school crush character.
Yeah, and faded very quickly from the film by about halfway point.
Yeah, because you also have Taeho K, um, his character Colin becoming more of the slowly dawning love interest, which I think we all saw coming from a mile away.
Uh-huh. And also, we both put ourselves into those shoes because we both have wonderful singing voices,
Of course.
and we were the geeky, unloved kids in high school.
Yeah, and I don't know that the Colin story typically ends that way in real life.
Uh, no, it definitely ends with a lot of crying, I think.
Yeah,
I seem
yeah.
to recall. I seem to recall a lot of crying and listening to, like, Slipknot.
Or corn.
Yeah, yeah. It's probably one of those two, actually. Yeah,
Yeah.
that was definitely that moment for me. Yeah, I've been there, folks. I do understand his plight.
Yeah.
Uh,
Colin will do better later in life.
he'll come around. He'll age into his looks eventually, and he'll just be like the nicest guy in the room. And those years of bouncing back from rejections will have given him an edge of like comedy that he can use to woo people.
That's right. We're Team Colin. Good for you, Colin. You'll get there one day.
Yeah, you got the person you loved. I mean, you weren't very good in a fight, but hey, who is?
No, very true. Very true.
One other thing I wanted to chuck in terms of likes is I do actually appreciate that for a good portion of this film it is on location.
Yeah, no, that's very true. Like it actually is showcasing its Italian locations very nicely.
Yeah, I've seen many films, Fast X included, that whilst they did shoot partially in Rome, used green screen for a lot of what they were meant to be shooting in Rome.
Yeah.
And other locations too. And you just think like if you're gonna go there, use it. And they did. And I think they made the best out of the locations.
No, I agree. I agree. And actually I have one other like I'll throw in too, which is that
Sure.
Chloe Coleman, is a very capable young actress.
Mm-hmm.
But like they put her in a lot of physical situations in this movie, and I think she pulls them off really well. Like you have her having like a taser fight at one point with those,
Looks great too. With the guys from the first film.
yeah, like the gay couple assassins.
Yeah.
They come back at the end of this movie in kind of a weird inclusion that I was like, what? Like, okay,
I think it's just to have them back. I think that's the only reason they're there.
It's a little jarring when they are reintroduced. It feels like they're just throwing them in for the sake of having characters from the previous movie, but nonetheless, like she's got a fight there that's really effective. She's got like a scene with Anna Faris. It feels like Chloe Coleman is definitely up to the task. It's not a case of like we need to prop up this kid in these sequences.
No, if anything, they're shooting around more to get Bautista out of the film. It feels
Yeah,
like.
yeah, and even a scene where she's like using like a sniper rifle. I didn't even blink. I did not have that moment of like, oh boy, here we go, the kid trying to do something.
Well, that's such a good point, though. It's such a good point because I think, and it is credit to this film, and I think the first one too, is we have lamented. We're going into our 5th year of spy movie reviews. We've seen quite a few. We're hitting 200 soon, right? And the amount of times we've seen films where this person, average Joe, average Jill, I suppose in this case, goes from zero to hero in the blink of an eye.
Yeah.
There was a gradual process here. She learnt the skills, and then when she gets a gun, she's terrible with it.
Right.
Like, that feels realistic. Like, Jamie Lee Curtis in True Lies falls down the stairs with a machine gun, and shoots the bad guy accidentally. That's one thing. She's had training, and she's still not good enough because she has no practical experience on missions. She has some ingenuity and fighting skills that she's learnt in her dojo with Dave Bautista, but she's never used a gun. Or not very rarely used a gun, and so she's not very good at that. It makes sense, and I appreciate that there's a little bit of time spent to not make her just like super competent.
No, they like showcase that she is very physically capable and is learning the Guile flash kick from Street Fighter 2 for some reason.
Yeah.
But
Good callback. Wow. Yeah, that's true. Actually, that is the Guile flash kick. Wow.
Yeah, but like they showcase her physical abilities, but they're not saying just because she can do the physical, martial arts stuff, she's also like a incredible, weapons user.
Yeah, like Dave Bautista, the character in this film, has done 5 tours of duty when he was an army ranger and stuff like that. That he has physical, practical experience that he can apply to his missions. She doesn't have any of that. She's just a classroom spy at this point.
Yeah, or Flula Borg as well is like a well-trained assassin. Yeah.
Yeah. And I will just add in as a final note, and I can hear them singing in my ear now. I did love that choral stuff.
Moving on.
Are you saying that does not like soothe your soul?
No. God, no.
Really? What do you listen to wind down? What's your wind down music, Cam?
I don't really have wind down music. I listen to podcasts, but I guess it would be more
You're
like,
so tense.
yeah, I guess it would be more like film scores.
Okay. Which often involve choral singing.
I mean,
Duel of the Fates.
that's true. I suppose you got me on Duel of the Fates, but it's not like children singing.
I got you on a technicality and I'll take it.
We interrupt this program to bring you a special report.
Red alert, Spyhards, we are shaking things up over on the Patreon page.
That's right, we are launching an exclusive new show where we tackle the exploits of the small screen's greatest secret agents, like Jack Bauer, George Smiley, and beyond.
And don't forget, every month you also get 2 Agents in the Field episodes where we decode the adventures of your favorite spy actors in their biggest non-spy movies. But Cam, tell the people what we have coming up next.
Scott, if you're going to close out the holiday season, you have to do it with style. And who had more style than Mr. Cary Grant? This week we are going to look at the 1947 Christmas film The Bishop's Wife, starring, yes, Mr. Cary Grant. Will this comedy be divine? We're going to find out.
So strap on your Condor Man wings and soar into the future with us over at patreon.com/spyhards.
But before Big O zaps us with a red pulsating laser, let's get back to the Spy Jinx.
Right, we've already discussed some of the things we don't like about My Spy the Eternal City, and we don't want to go on for eternity, but let's talk about some of our dislikes. I'll lead us off. My biggest bugbear, the dislike that's underlined in my notes, is its length.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not usually one to complain about length of films, but
that was a very pregnant pause there.
I just thought I'd leave it there just to, gestate for a moment. I've used gestate twice in this podcast. Sorry, it's my word of the day. No, this film did not need to be an hour and 50 minutes.
It was a sin, a cinematic sin that this movie was as long as it is.
It's I can hear the CinemaSins video with a little ping noise. Someone mentioned this film does not deserve to be an hour and 45 minutes. Ping!
It's a good thing that they wound up at the Vatican City because they should have been doing Hail Marys for how long this movie was.
Oh, well done. Well done.
Thank you.
It's bonkers. There's so much fat on this bit of meat that could be trimmed off. It honestly felt like it was just going through the motions at times.
Mm-hmm.
Like all of the Bautista as a babysitter on a mission in Italy stuff. I mean, yeah, some of it's useful, I guess, but not all of it. All of the subplot with the boys.
Right.
Like, I know it's about Chloe Coleman's character learning what she wants and stuff, and that's probably quite important to her. But I don't think it added anything to the story.
No. I mean, it's a little bit of that coming of age story because it's showing her developing as, a young woman and first love.
But what do you want? Like, do you want the buddy comedy with Ken Jeong? Like, that whole mission where they retrieve the van and the killer birds.
Yeah.
That's a 15-minute segment.
Yes, it is.
Why is it there?
And that's like the British safe house, right?
Are they in Britain?
No, they're not in Britain. It's like, I think, a British safe house, though.
Okay.
Which is why they're breaking in.
I didn't hear God Save the King, so I assumed it wasn't British.
But then I had to, ask myself, wait, do the British use attack finches? Is that part of their strategy?
Well, that is a tried and tested method of protecting one's own spy gear.
Sure.
Unfortunately, whenever I try to have finches in the house, they just run away from me. Or fly, if anything. They do try to run sometimes. They don't get very far, so then they fly.
I'll tell you the most damning stretching out of time in this movie, though. And as you can hear from my voice, I wasn't necessarily the healthiest when I was watching My Spy, The Eternal City, which, doesn't necessarily make it more joyful to sit through as an experience.
Sure.
When we got to the end and there was the countdown clock for the big weapon going off, the bomb in the Vatican City.
It was a nuke, suitcase nuke.
It was a nuke, yeah. It was a half-hour timer. And I looked at the counter on the movie and I had about half an hour left to the movie, and I was like, no, like we're there. There's
Don't do
nothing.
it.
There's nothing left to do other than to stretch out action sequences and to have characters run around in chaos, because it's
When they do.
yeah, and it's the kind of thing that could easily have been resolved in like 5 minutes if they really wanted to.
Yeah.
But they just like stretch it and stretch it and stretch it, and I feel like I was hallucinating by the end from just like the flu germs going to my brain. But I was like, oh my god, now they say there's only 18 minutes left. Like, why? Like, generally when you have a ticking clock, you want that clock to not be enough time to watch an episode of Arrested Development or something.
No, it really shouldn't, should it? It's interesting as well, watching clocks you mentioned. Sometimes in my notes, I don't often mention this on the episode, but when I'm not invested in a film, at some point I will check my watch, and I always write down how far into the film I am before I checked my watch.
Yeah.
I made it to 40 minutes in this film.
Okay.
It's pretty good innings.
Could be worse. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, that the whole ending sequence, I think the Finch sequence and the ending sequence could you could lose the entire Finch thing.
Yeah.
Like, you could lose it all in that sense. You could even lose the entire Ken Jeong subplot, to be honest with you.
Well, I mean, they're using a lot of the spy plot as an excuse to kind of create these scenarios to drop the characters in.
Sure.
And the problem is, it's kind of my issue with the first one, but the first one would set up a set piece and then just kind of like half-ass it. But they were also very small-scale things. It's like, oh, Dave Bautista goes skating. Oh, okay, he fell down a couple times. That's that, and we're moving on. We could have done more with that. Whereas here, it's like they would create these scenarios, but then they would be very protracted and not funny or inspired, which was worse, because then you just felt like you were like watching kind of people who can be very funny. Dave Bautista can be very funny, you know, like in the Guardians films, for example.
Sure.
Ken Jeong, we know. I don't even have to speak to him. Kristen Schaal, we know from, you know, her considerable comedy work. But you'd be dropping them in scenarios where nothing particularly funny was happening, and they were just stretching it and stretching it and stretching it, trying to get something out of it. And like, it really made me appreciate the kind of half-assed approach of the first movie.
Well, I think it's also just sort of damning. Its length is damning in the sense of, I mentioned the 4-year period of this being put together.
Yeah.
This film feels like a film that was put together in 6 months. Like, they didn't necessarily know what they wanted to do, so they just filmed a bunch of stuff and tied it together in the editing room.
Why was there like a martial arts fight scene at like a military base?
Just so they can have the heist sequence with Chloe Coleman and Kristen Schaal, I suppose.
I guess so.
But all of it, like, the whole Ken Jeong subplot, I think is completely extraneous to the story. Like, they could just find the suitcase nukes, and that's it. Like, you don't need to have any of this stuff about access codes or anything like that.
It's also a lot of like retconning, because you're like, wait a second, Sophie goes to school with Ken Jeong's character's kid?
Yeah.
Like, what?
I don't know. What about you? Something you want to bring up?
I feel like we're just on the same page here.
Yeah?
Like,
Let's end the episode.
actually, you know what? I will say this. Okay, because I think my dislikes are kind of like yours. Like, there's just, conceptually, they're pulling the characters apart. That doesn't work. They're stretching it out. They're dragging it out.
Sure.
There's like only so much you can do. And I think, to me, it's like, as you were talking about, like just the pace, the length of the movie feels like it just goes on and on and on to a torturous degree. The way that something like Trenchcoat, which was probably like 95 minutes, but felt like way longer.
Yeah.
It's like, yikes. And you and I have tackled enough movies that are like 2.5 hours or 2 hours, 15 minutes that can fly by.
I always think of Where Eagles Dare. That's over 2 hours.
Yeah.
Dense as it goes. And you just think you blink and the whole film's gone.
Or a movie that's polarizing, but, you know, No Time to Die is like really long. It's over 2.5 hours, but it's consistently coming up with things to engage you. You know, it doesn't feel like you're kind of going through the motions and repeating the same things over and over. You know, you may not like some of its directions, but it's giving you new directions throughout the course of the movie to adjust to and to be kind of surprised by and to learn about.
Sure.
Whereas like this movie is just hitting the same beats over and over for 2 hours straight. But I will say, like, if there's a dislike, I'm going to pick just a smaller one because I think just as a whole, there's so many problems. But like, you have really funny people in this movie. You know, I've named it, you know, obviously Ken Jeong, Kristen Schaal, Anna Faris is very funny. Craig Robinson can be very funny. What happened here?
What was that?
Like, Craig Robinson, this may be the biggest check cashing job I've seen in the history of Spyhards, where it's like, nothing against Craig Robinson, who I'm sure was just like, yeah, sure, I'll do a couple days work on this. But they gave him nothing, and it feels like they were just like, I don't know, come up with something funny. And it doesn't even feel like a professional performance in a movie. It just feels like, why is he here? And that kind of extends to a lot of the comedy performances in this movie. Kristen Schaal is like often brilliant, and she just feels like she's straining against nothing here. And I just don't understand. At a certain point, they needed to decide whether they want to make like an action movie or a comedy and put the focus on one or the other, because the action isn't that impressive and the comedy is dire.
I go back to my point. I just think they threw this together very last minute, despite it taking 4 years. I think they just wanted to get the band back together and just thought of scenarios to have them all in the same room and tied together with a very loose plot.
Do you think Dave Bautista is good in this one?
I think he's less invested.
I do too.
It's a real shame because I think he's a producer in these films.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I think he genuinely liked the first one, so much so that he produced it and worked on it as well. And I think he's probably part of this. But I think Dave Bautista of 2019 when he was first pitched this film versus Dave Bautista of 2023 when he shot the second one, his star has risen. And maybe he sees this as perhaps slightly lower on the totem pole of things that he should be focusing on. Plus, he's trying to actively move away from action roles. He's said this in interviews since.
Yeah.
Like, he wants to focus on more dramatic roles. This is not what this role is.
Yeah, and at this point, he's working with, obviously James Gunn consistently, but he's also working with Denis Villeneuve.
Mm-hmm.
I just tend to think he's probably looking at this project as something he can quickly do in a couple months, which is probably why they shot all his stuff together and why he wasn't going on the Serengeti tour. The safari tour.
Sure.
That's probably why, because he's like, get me in and get me out. And you can kind of feel it. Like, he doesn't feel as invested in this one. Even something like Knock at the Cabin, which was, a small scale M. Night Shyamalan film. He's great in that movie, and you feel like he's really invested in that performance. And here, he's not bad. He has enough star charisma that when he shows up, you're going to be like, oh no, he's fun to be around. It's kind of like Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Mm-hmm.
You're never going to watch an Arnold movie and be like, Arnold was boring in that movie. He's just fun to be around, even if he's not as, inspired as Terminator 2. I kind of feel like that's what's going on with Dave Bautista here. He's here. He's kind of fun to be around, but this is definitely not him at his most engaged.
And I think it's also a real shame in the sense of there is a nugget of sort of drama in the story that he has in this film. There is something that can be drawn from it. There is this idea of a spy wanting to step away from the active agent role to more of an analyst role because he has a family now and he wants to try and protect the sanctity of his relationship and the loved ones he looks after. I think that's interesting, and he's trying to balance that with being a stepfather, which is a very complex role for someone to have. There is complexity to the role in this film. I don't think the script ties into that or digs anything out of that, but I don't think Dave Bautista adds anything to it either, which I think is a real shame because Dave Bautista is a person whose star I've watched risen.
Yeah.
And I'm continuing to watch rise. I don't think this is necessarily a blemish on his career.
No.
But, like, he hasn't done many spy movies, and I was hoping he was a bit more invested in this one.
Yeah, which makes me really fearful for My Spy 3.
Maybe he'll be more invigorated by it. Maybe he had like a really tough schedule in 2023 because I have to think he's shooting Dune 2 that year.
Yeah.
Probably Knock in the Cabin in the Wood. I don't know what it is. That one, the Shyamalan film, and I think there's another one he did that year too. A very busy year. He's probably just a bit fried.
I came across a quote from him too, where he was talking. I got to be honest, a lot of the interview quotes from him on My Spy 2's press tour were asking about other projects. They were not exactly digging deep into the complex layers of My Spy 2, but they were asking him about how he'd said over the years he really wanted to play Bane, and now that James Gunn was running the DC, universe, would he potentially be playing Bane? And he said, I said that for a long time, but now I'm a little too old to do it. but also I want to be the lead. And I was like, okay. And he's like, it's at a point where I just want to be the lead, and that's what's most important. And I thought, okay, well, I mean, My Spy, 2, does he feel like it's enough of a leading vehicle to interest him?
I think that's a toughie. I think that's really down to the individual. I don't like hearing that about Dave Bautista, I have to say, because he was someone I disassociated from someone like The Rock,
Yeah.
who definitely feels like he needs to be front and center at all times. And when he's off screen, people need to be talking about The Rock. I got the impression Dave Bautista was more interested in taking interesting character roles. So to hear him say that is quite disappointing, because I thought he was more interested in the role than the prestige.
Yeah. And so I'm curious, just going forward, if that is the case, or if it is, I mean, honestly, like if Denis Villeneuve comes knocking, is he just like, I'm in, like whatever. It's interesting character roles. I don't care.
Yeah.
But
But if it's like, middling script, but I'm in charge, maybe that's more interesting.
maybe we'll see. We can only look forward towards 2025 and beyond and see what Dave Bautista does. But I look at him in like Knock at the Cabin, which he's the lead. It's a smaller budget thriller, but he is really pushing what he can do. And I'm hoping that's what he means more, that he's interested in roles like that.
And I think I could talk another 20 minutes about things that don't work for me in this film. I think you probably could too. But I do think we would be recycling what we said earlier. And I would point fingers at this film for doing the same thing. So I don't think we need to go any further into things it dislikes.
Yeah, I wish there was more like spy connections for us to like talk about, because there was so much True Lies, and Arnold references in the first one. In this movie, like there's not a lot really to draw from.
No, it's got a few like Mission Impossible style misdirects and things like that,
Yeah.
heel turns and stuff like that. But then that's pretty spy movie tropes as far as they go. And I think, if I was going to keep going with dislikes, the thing I would say, and I said it at the beginning, and maybe this is what we close out this section on, is I just think the film had nothing to say.
No.
And I think that's the most damning thing. When anyone's making art, podcasting, in a way, isn't art. Painting, music, anything you want to point your finger at, if it's art. If you're doing it completely soullessly, no one will be happy with the finished product.
I mean, here's the thing. We're just two guys in our 30s and 40s talking about a kids movie. Ultimately, like, our opinion isn't really relevant to whether My Spy 3 gets made. But here's my question to you. My Spy The Eternal City came out, a handful of months ago. Have you ever heard another human being mention this movie?
No.
Yeah, like it's a vapor of a movie. Like it's not.
It did get like marketing in the UK. It was definitely on some buses here and stuff.
Sure, but like I know people that have kids, that would watch family movies. I've never heard anyone mention watching My Spy: The Eternal City. Like, I don't think it's just us thinking this is a nothing of a movie. I kind of think it is a nothing of a movie.
I think they also waited too long.
Oh, definitely. It's a little bit of that. Not that it was a wait too long situation. It was more of a reboot, but that Spy Kids 5 experiment on Netflix. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that also waited too long, for sure. I'm not anticipating a My Spy 3, but if they made money on this somehow, then I don't think it's that far out of the realm. I also could see a world, I'm not sure if this would be successful, where Chloe Coleman is in charge of the film and Dave Bautista's barely in it.
I could definitely see that. Yeah.
Dave has to shoot 2 weeks, gets a reduced payday, but it's her film.
Right.
And that's a lot cheaper.
Yeah. Maybe that's the future of My Spy. And I'm sure you could probably get maybe Kristen Schaal comes back or something. Like, they only pay for one of the supporting cast.
And you probably need a bigger name in there for her to go up against. The villain needs to be a big name to pull people in.
I don't think it's a big name. I don't think they have to go big name with it. I think it's just it's streaming content for young people, and that's that.
Well, let us know, folks. What do you think My Spy 3 might be? I'll put a post up about it at some point this week, asking as well to get your thoughts. Notes before we get to the knock. I've got a couple. What do you have, Cam?
I never in my life want to see another wacky montage of kids shooting vacation footage on smartphones. I can't stand this device. It makes me feel old and angry.
I mean, I use my camera phone sometimes. Camera phone. God, I just aged myself.
Oh, that is the oldest thing you've ever said.
That is. I felt myself I felt my back get stiffer as I said it. Like I want to shout at kids outside for having fun.
Time is the fire in which you're burning.
And I am burning up a fever right now. I do that, but I've seen it in a lot of post-COVID films.
Yeah.
COVID used a lot of Zoom and video call stuff. And also you got things like, was it Searching?
Yeah, that's right. And Missing.
John Cho film.
There was Missing and Searching. There's two of them.
Right. Yeah. And that was a concept, and I think that really worked for the film. But I have seen that sort of style infect a lot of other films, and I just find it to be incredibly lazy.
Yeah, it just feels kind of cheap.
Yeah.
And like they're trying to speak to like a Gen Z audience, and it's embarrassing.
There was no TikTok dancing, though. A real shame. But
That's
Kristen
true.
Schaal did make a point to just throw out, I thought we'd do a TikTok.
Yes.
Aye.
Yeah. The only other note I had was Blueberry is dead. R.I.P.
Much like this film, flush down the toilet.
That's right.
Oof. I had two. One was, it's interesting to see the trajectory of the My Spy series to follow the Spider-Man Tom Holland trilogy trajectory.
Okay, how so?
The first one's in school, and you're getting to know the characters. The second one, they go on a European excursion.
That third one is going to be real ambitious.
I'm wondering about that. That was going to be my question, is what if they follow that trajectory, what's the multiverse version of My Spy 3?
Something I probably don't want to watch, but it would mean that I guess they bring back the villains of this movie and the previous film.
Sure, okay, yeah.
And maybe like Dave Bautista. Well, maybe we bring in Arnold from Kindergarten Cop.
Oh, so you're going outside of the My Spy universe, but in other connected films. I mean, why don't we just, in the other way, why don't we just involve other kids-related spy films? Why don't we get Jackie Chan with his tuxedo turn up in kind of like an Avengers Endgame moment?
Is it Tuxedo or would it be The Spy Next Door?
I mean, they're both films that he did, but the tuxedo was automated, much like the wrong trousers in Wallace and Gromit. So, like, that's kind of a fun gimmick. He had like an Iron Man heads-up display thing going on, if I remember correctly.
That's true, but I feel like if we're going to do like kids movies, I think Spy Next Door is more of his Jackie Chan and kids spy movie.
I remember there being kids in the tuxedo, but I'll take your word for it. Or in that case, why don't we get Frankie Muniz out of retirement to reprise his role of Cody Banks?
I don't want to see this movie.
So you get Cody Banks turns up. The spy kids, who aren't kids anymore, they turn up. Anyone else you want to fold in? So, cats and dogs?
I mean, I would get like the casts of the lesser Spy Kids movies.
Can they just be like meat in the grinder? Like they're the first ones thrown out in the big battle at the end of the film, and they're all killed.
Sure, like all the new kids from like
the OSS kids turn up.
Yeah, like the new
Floop.
The new kids from All the Time in the World and whatever the last Spy Kids movie was called.
Spy Kids Armageddon.
Armageddon, thank you, yeah.
I hate that I remember that.
Yeah, you should.
Yeah, I'm so sad right now. Well, that's a film I don't want to see, but it's interesting that it's following the trajectory. Will they do that? I mean, even if you strip away all the nonsense of the multiverse, the third film is really about like the loss of his mum.
Yes, that's true, yeah.
So maybe we go down that route.
Yeah.
Watch this space. Have I prognosticated the future? What would you call it? My Spy. What was the third one called? Far From Home?
It's Homecoming, Far From Home, and No Way Home.
No Way Home. Okay, I don't know. I can't think of what I would call the third one then. And the second note I had, I was going to mention the parallels between My Spy 2 and Moonraker, which I thought were quite interesting.
Yep. Just
in that sort of initial sequence. I put a post up about that online during the week, I'm sure. But it was also fun to see, and this is a weird gimmick that I don't know if you've ever noticed this because you don't really watch wrestling, so maybe you would never get the connection. But whenever wrestlers work in film and television, they're often directed in their action scenes to use the moves they used in wrestling.
Yeah.
Dave Bautista, delivered the Bautista bomb, his power bomb signature move in this film.
Okay, when?
During the scene where they're fighting in the tunnels of the Vatican, like in the well, he picks up a guy and power bombs him through a giant like crate.
Okay. I think I was at that point like barely clinging to lucidity.
I can understand that. Your fever must have been running high just at the sight of Batista bomb in your eyes.
That's what put it over the top.
Yeah, it certainly was. But you do see it in other films. Like I've seen The Rock deliver the rock bottom in several of his films.
Okay. Right.
I've not seen Hulk Hogan drop a leg drop though.
I think I remember like Stone Cold Steve Austin did his move in the first Expendables movie.
I can absolutely understand that happening. I think he also does it in like the Marine or whatever that one he did.
Oh, John Cena was the Marine.
It was kind of like Battle Royale. It was basically the Battle Royale story that Steve Austin was in.
Wasn't it The Condemned?
Maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah. I can't believe I remember that either. I'm really embarrassing myself.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure Goldberg did his move in Universal Soldier 2.
Is that another post I smell? Maybe it is. Is it weird that they do that though?
Not really. It's the trademark. It's kind of like having Arnold say, "I'll be back" or something.
Sure. I just wonder if like the actors hear that direction from the stunt or coordinator and like, ugh, trying to get away from this.
I think they have a sense of humor about it usually.
Except for The Rock.
Did Hornswoggle do his trademark move in Leprechaun Origins? That's the question.
That really is the question. I couldn't tell you what Hornswoggle's signature move was, so I couldn't figure that one out. But if you're a big Hornswoggle fan, listener, singular, not plural, let us know.
Yeah.
Did Swoggle hit his finisher?
In Leprechaun Origins? I don't know.
We'll never know, frankly. No one's ever going to watch it to find out. Well, that's my notes wrapped up. The last job we have here is to see if we can induct a My Spy film onto the knock list. The first one didn't make it, can the second one bring it home? Probably not after the last 80 minutes of discussion, but Cam has a fever. Anything is possible. What have you got?
Definitely, yes. Kick out every other movie,
Oh, no.
and it is the knock list dedicated entirely to My Spy, the Eternal City. No,
The virus
no.
has gone to his head, everyone.
Yeah.
Send help.
No, not a chance. This is not a good movie and not worthy of the knock list.
And I won't hang around any further. I mean, there's a mention of a colonoscopy in this film, and I frankly think I'd have a colonoscopy than watch this film again.
This is kind of like one of the lower bars. I mean, we've seen worse, but like it's one of the lower bars.
Oh yeah, we've seen
for
worse.
Family movies.
Yeah,
It's like these are the movies where you go like, oh God, like this is not the podcast you want to record.
this is not. And the cardinal sin of this thing is it had nothing to say. Like if it had an entertaining concept and it executed it poorly, I would be far more forgiving than something that's just homogenous 1 hour and 50 minutes.
And it's not as weird as Cats and Dogs 3. Like that was a terrible movie, but you and I had like a lot of moments in that to make fun of.
Yeah, this is just boring.
Yeah.
And I hope the discussion hasn't been, but 2 no's, and as such, My Spy the Eternal City is not making the knock list. As it stands, this is the end of the My Spy universe. Could there be a third? You'll never know. But Cam, I'm going to throw it to you. What are your rankings for the My Spy films?
Well, Scott, I think there's another question we have to ask.
Oh, no. Is there?
Is this a movie worth disavowing?
No.
You don't think so?
No.
Okay, explain yourself.
It made me laugh at a couple of points. The chemistry between I love the characters. I love the characters. I like the characters in this.
Scott
film.
loves the characters. Loves
Flu.
JJ.
It's in
JJ
my
and
eyes.
Sophie are 2 characters that Scott carries with him every day of his life.
They've Batista bombed their way into my heart. No, I like the characters, and I genuinely wanted this film to be better than it was. I think I was let down by its execution, by its lack of scope. And so I think the sin of this film is that it's overlong and boring. I don't think it's an embarrassment. I don't think it is worse than any of the films on the disavowed list. So, like, I think I'd rather watch Men in Black 2 than this.
Right.
But that's maybe just Men in Black 2 in the rearview mirror, and it's been so long since I've watched it. But I certainly wouldn't want to watch Trenchcoat instead of this. I could probably sit through this again if I had to. I couldn't sit through any of the other films on the disavowed list. I think that's probably the benchmark for me.
Like, I would definitely lean towards a yes on this one for the disavowed, but like, I kind of know what you're saying. There's enough likability with Dave Bautista and Chloe Coleman to kind of
And
pull
Ken
it
and
out.
Kirsten as well. Like there's moments of
Uh,
genuine comedy in there and stuff. Like I
Not
think
in this movie.
you could get through it. I don't think that. Okay, no, I get you. I just don't think it's bad enough to do it. I think this is on the line. I'm not saying an easy dismiss and like, oh, it's like close to a knock list. It's close to a disavowed. It's on the borderline, but it isn't bad enough that I would sanctify that.
Okay, well, we both have to agree on a disavowed, so we're going to say it doesn't make the list. But I guess it's up to those of you who've seen The Eternal City listening to this episode to determine, which side of the fence you fall. But we'll say no. But as you asked me my rankings, it's pretty obvious. My Spy and My Spy 2.
Yeah, I think mine is exactly the same. It's all to play for in the third one if they do it. You could come back and surprise us, folks. Who knows?
You can't do worse.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah,
Probably.
This should be a learning. This should be a teaching for you, a teachable moment to do better.
I hope you can't do worse. Now I'm really questioning this.
I think the film when they do a spin-off with Ken Jeong and Kirsten Schaal, that's the real
That's what I'm wondering.
It's like the American Pie spin-offs. Like these things just shouldn't exist.
That's what I'm now wondering. I'm like, maybe it will be worse because you'll lose a lot of the talent and you'll just have like one person comes back. Ooh.
Well, it's like going from Cats and Dogs 1, which actually has some interesting moments and is trying to do something and has some pretty innovative technology used in the film and some good voice acting, through to number 3, which is just the absolute pits.
Yeah.
It's a
no
pretty
kidding.
easy crapshoot, too, because 2 isn't that great, but 2 at least has some things going for it. 3 is terrible.
I do think it's very likely that probably within the lifespan of this podcast, we get another movie called like My Spy, where it's a new kid, probably a lesser lead actor, and it's
Or with Chloe.
maybe, but she's maybe moves on to better things. But we get like the equivalent of like Kindergarten Cop 2, where it's like Dolph Lundgren and like some random kid.
Right. Like we set up a program now of sending our agents into schools to find new agents.
Well, they still make Home Alone movies, right? Like you would never watch them, but like I do wonder if My Spy becomes like a brand where it's just like put, tough guy actor who's definitely on the D list with a kid and just like slap the My Spy name on it.
The D list is very apropos given the rumors about Dave Bautista, but I'll leave that there.
Oh, wow.
There you go. That was My Spy, The Eternal City. That was your second Christmas present of the year, you lucky, lucky people.
We are real Scrooges this Christmas.
Well, I think they had a pretty good run last week.
They definitely did. Definitely, yeah.
We got your letters, folks. Tinker Tailor has been soldier spied. But, Cam, we are approaching the final week of the year. What are we talking about?
It's our annual wrap up to the year. So we're going to look back on the year that was Spyhards podcasting in 2024 and cite our favorite moments and just go through categories, surprising movies, discoveries, all that kind of thing. We've done it in the past. We'll have voicemails from you, the listeners, in there as well. And who knows what other surprises.
And we've already got some things lined up for January. It's looking bright on the horizon for 2025 for Spyhards. But until then, your mission, folks, should you choose to accept it, is to join us for our wrap-up of 2024. Spy Jinx Aplenty is coming your way in your podcast feeds next week. Your voicemails are always a highlight to us. But that leaves me to say, until next week, folks, we hope you all have a very Merry Christmas.